My name is Madeline Warren. I'm very brave in that I say my full name, but I think it's very important just to do that these days to embolden others to feel that they can come out and be brave and talk about the subject as well. I live in Scotland now. I used to live in England for about 20 years, and I've had a lot of adventures in England, and maybe I might talk quite a lot about that today. I first came across trans ideology, I think, because I kept meeting people who were calling themselves trans. I was a mature student in 2014 and I met a young woman at college who was calling herself a trans man. And I just felt, oh, it was just embarrassing having to go along with this. She was about 18 and she was a very slight girl. She was so small. Even as a woman, she's a very small, petite woman. And we're all having to call her by this male name. She had chosen a very silly male name. Even that was silly. And she would wear shoes that were too big for her feet to try and make her look herself like manly. And we all had to go along with her. We kept stumbling over the he, she, he thing. We kept having to stumble over that. The teachers were stumbling over it. Her fellow students were stumbling over it. But we all went along with it. That was about 2014, and then another friend at another uni I went to, he came out as trans, a very manly looking man, came out as trans, calling himself a woman. And again, I was stumbling over the pronouns for that. I was trying to be nice and all that. And so it was in my face for a long time as well, this trans thing. And I just felt stupid. It's like, what? You expecting me to act like I'm stupid and that I cannot see what I am seeing. You're making me feel stupid and you're making me a liar. And I hate that you're making me a liar. Hated it. Deep down in me, I couldn't stand it, even though I was trying to be nice. I was like, this is so wrong. And then, all the politics started coming. I was looking at Twitter more. Twitter's a huge base for knowledge. I was looking at Twitter, and of course, the wonderful Reduxx website. I mean, those women do amazing work on the Reduxx website. Anyone who doesn't know it must go and look it up. I think it's Reddux. It's a funny spelling. She does comes out with all this stuff, and then the thing that really triggered me that I must come out now is she's just talking about these horrendous cases in America of these prisoners, male prisoners in women's prisons. Really, not quote just rapists and murderers, but the most violent, horrendous rapists and murderers were in women's prisons. And even that, I was like, oh my God, that was horrible. Even more triggered me was all these feminist organizations were pushing for these men to be in the women's prisons. That was what was most shocking, horrendous. That was just, I cannot keep quiet about this anymore. This is evil among us. It's abhorrent, and I could not keep quiet about it anymore. And I had to come out and start talking about it publicly. I just had to. It's horrible. It's so horrible. I just couldn't keep quiet anymore. My sister, I think it's my sister, was like, "Did you know blah blah blah?" And did you know? And she just go, "Oh, what?" She hadn't heard of any of this. It was my sister first, and then yeah, I suppose I just kept quiet. And in real life, I just kept quiet about it. And then I was like, "That's it. It's all going on Facebook now. I'm coming out of the closet." Yeah, my sister, and then I didn't speak about it to anyone in real life, so I had to write about it on Facebook and things. And then a couple of my dear friends who I hadn't spoken to, they came and talked to me about it, and I was like, okay, because even your dearest friends, I don't know if you agree with this or not. I don't know. That's how shocking it can be when people go along with this. But thankfully, most of my very dear friends agree with me. Yeah, absolutely. I've lost friends. Yeah. I had lots of young friends for my time when I was at uni. I've lots of young friends, and they're not my friends anymore. They won't answer me. They won't talk to me. And some acquaintances, I wouldn't call them friends, but acquaintances who I liked and respected, they've just been arguing with me, think I'm horrible, hate me. Yes, I knew that would happen. That's why I took so long to come onto Facebook and come out and start talking about this. Of course, I know that it's a dangerous, is that the word? It's a dangerous thing to do. It's a socially dangerous thing to do. You will lose friends, you can lose your job. I know that, yeah. But I've lost friends, but I think, well, I think you're horrible. You're an idiot. I can put up with you being an idiot, but you're horrible. You're a horrible person that you don't care about men and women's prisons. You don't care about gender non-conforming children. You don't care about women. You just care about men. The worst men. You care about the worst men. And of course, they're my friends, so they're nice people, but when it comes to this subject, they're mental. So it's like, okay, I've lost a mental friend then. Is that a problem? So I've kept the good friends and I've lost the crazy ones. I started posting in 2022. And what was my first post about? I think I was doing flurries of posts at that point. I think I first of all, I did say I can't keep quiet about this any longer. I actually said that I've been quiet about this for too long, but I've just know so much now. I cannot keep quiet, and I know I'm going to lose friends. I actually said all this. I can't keep quiet now. And then I started posting about men and women's sports, men breastfeeding, the prison situation, and the little gender non-conforming children being transed away, gays being transed away. I was just flurries and flurries of stuff, and I've kind of calmed down now. But yeah, I was just going on, and people were just going, "You're obsessed." It's like, yeah, yes, I am obsessed. You should be too. Yeah, I am obsessed. And I've got stories to back it up from my personal life. I have lots of stories. People say, "Oh, if you knew trans people, you wouldn't be horrible. You wouldn't be like this. They're just nice people. They're the most marginalized people. They're very kind. You don't know any, or you wouldn't be such a bigot." And I said, "Well, I have. I've known quote trans unquote people for decades, decades since the 90s. I've known them, or they weren't called trans then, but I've known what we now call as trans people, cross-dressers, heterosexual and homosexual cross-dressers. I've known all of them, and there is a difference between the heterosexual and the homosexual cross-dressers, yeah, but I've known all of them. Males and females, yeah. No, lots of them. First came across a cross-dressing person. I was working a fetish shop in Soho in London. So they used to come in. They used to come in and try on shoes and the big we sold all the big sizes of shoes for all those men. So yeah, I came across them then. Um, and then I would go to the clubs and the cross-dressers were there. And it was a fetish. We all knew it was a fetish. The dress code for the fetish clubs was rubber, leather, PVC, cross-dressing. We all knew that was a fetish. You can't get into the clubs unless you're dressed in fetish gear. Cross-dressing was a fetish. And they weren't cross-dressers weren't ashamed of that. They knew that. It's fine. They were proud of it. Just call it as it is. We're not bothered about that. We're not prudes, but I am a prude when you start saying no, it's not a fetish, and you want to impose it on people, not in a fetish club. When you go to a fetish club, you accept that there's going to be fetishists there, and it's like, yeah, that's great, we're fine. You're fetishists, fine. But when you're outside and doing your daily life, no, I don't want people imposing their fetishism on me, even though I'm quite open-minded about that kind of thing. Yeah, and you would get ready. Sometimes I would get ready with some cross-dressing men. We'd all get ready in someone's house. There'd be some cross-dressing men there, and they're just, they're some of them are just horrible. I mean, they were just builders in a dress and a wig, and they'd stand in front of the full length mirror, and they'd stand there and gaze adoringly at themselves, and say things like, I'm more sexy than the most of the women I know. And they were in a room full of beautiful women that were all dressed up to the nines with all their sexy, sexy clothes on, and they're standing there going, I'm sexier than most of the women that I know. It's like, even then, I suppose, we were still possibly intimidated by that. No one would go, what on earth are you talking about? Can you see yourself? Even then, we just let them off with it. Maybe we just shouldn't have. We should have just said, no, no, you're ugly. You're brave. You're going out and looking like that, hobbling around with your bandy legs and your high heels. But you're an ugly man in a dress and bad makeup. They can't see what we can see. Yeah, I was on the fetish scene. I had my own company. I made clothes and I went to the clubs and I had friends and I knew a lot of doms and things. Yeah, and I'm still friends with some dominatrixes. One of my friends, she's a dominatrix and she's funny and it's funny because she does sissification as one of her services, which is transforming a man into a woman. That's sissification. And she's quite good. She's really good friends with her clients, and so they sit and have chats afterwards. And one of her clients, so he's sitting there with his wig on and his makeup and things that she's applied to him, and they're just sitting and having normal chats. And so he says, no, he completely disagrees with all this trans rights things. He just knows it's wrong. He just knows it's he's one of these trans people that everyone's trying to get rights for. He goes, so he has chats around the dinner table with his wife and his teenage children, and they're all saying trans rights, and trans women are women, and they should be treated the same. And he's sitting there going, no, they shouldn't be. No, no, trans women are men, and they're men with fetishes. But he can't tell them how he knows this. But he does, he knows, he's an experienced man. He knows that trans women are just men with fetishes. But and his naive children and his naive wife are telling him that they know better. And it's like, no, they don't. You really do not know better. I mean, shockingly, there's far more men who are against trans rights than there are women. Women seem to go along with us a lot more. I don't know why. I compare it to, like like I was saying to you the other day, Suzanne, like when your teenage daughters start going out with their mini skirts and their little high heels and their lovely pretty legs are showing, and the dads are going, "You are not going out like that. You are not going out like that. That's terrible. Mom, tell her she's not going out with that." And the mom's going, "Oh, but she's lovely with a lovely dress and she's got a lovely figure and she should show it off." And the dads are going, "She is not going out like that," because men know what's going on in other men's minds. They know that. That's why they're terrified for their little, beautiful little teenage girls who go in it because they know that filthy men are thinking filthy thoughts about them. I think it's the same with the trans rights issues. Women, stupid bloody women, are going, trans rights are human rights, and the men are going, no, men have fetishes. Men look upon women differently. You don't see the filthy thoughts that are going through men's minds, and that's why men out there are going, no, trannies and crossdressers, they're listening for the kink. It's not because they're in touch with their feminine side, they're very in touch with their male, filthy, sexual depravity side. Men know these things. So from that point of view, it's like it really has changed my views on men and women. I used to, I was I used to be quite not a man hater, but I used to go, yay, women and boo men a lot more than I do now. And now I just think, no, there's as I mentioned earlier, the feminists, there's lots of feminists who I just do not think have women's real rights and safety at heart. these men that are against extreme trans rights, they've got women's rights more at heart than the feminist groups. So in that way, I appreciate men a lot more now than I used to. Even the men with kinks and all that, it's like, men know their if you know your boundaries, then you're a good man. You might be have sexual kinks and things, but you know not to take it into certain places, then you're still a good man. You're a better man than the men who are taking their cross-dressing out into public, into schools, around children, around other women, into women's toilets, and you're a better man than these terrible feminists who want to push this onto society. Yeah, I think it's given me a unique perspective, having spent time in the fetish scene. It's made me more worldly in that sense, yeah. It's made me more worldly. You can have a kink or a fetish, you're not a bad person from having that, as I can be. You just need to, obviously, you need to have boundaries with that. Or even a bit of sense of humor with it. Have a bit of sense of humor with it. We're allowing or trans women out into schools. What's next? Shoe fetishists? Foot fetishists? Rubber fetishists? Where does this human rights going to stop? And I'm not being But she's the saying that. I just like, people, they're starting to talk about furries having rights. It's just an expression of love. No, it's not. The expression, it's not. We need to stop giving these rights, people rights, and get kinked back into your dirty bedroom or your basement where it belongs. My friend ran a pub and just in the middle of the countryside in Cornwall, and some guy came in with a mini skirt, ripped fishnet tights, and his crotch practically showing underneath. It was a really short miniskirt and high heels and all that. And he was sitting with his legs open, and he was very proudly sitting like that. Yeah, and she was shocked and horrified by that. Yeah, and she's a very worldly woman, but she was just shocked that someone would do that. Yeah. So yeah, these people feel emboldened to do that. Yeah, I mean, once they're allowed to go into their workplaces as Prunella, not Arthur, then they're actually going. You see all pictures of this, they're going and wearing fetish gear. It's not like a lady's business suit that they're wearing. They're wearing mini skirts, not the mini skirts and fishnets and fetish gear, you know what I mean? But they're wearing sexy clothes. It's like, what women is going into an office wearing that stuff? But they take the acceptance and they're running with it. They're really running with it and then trying to take it to the next level, aren't they? They're always pushing the boundaries, and we're always letting them push the boundaries. If your boss says you can go and dress like that, and your union says you can go and dress like that, and you can do it even in a school, and you can go into women's toilets, then yeah, why not keep trying to push these boundaries? They're quite right. Why not? If we're all going to let them do it, and they're still allowed to say that they're the most oppressed and marginalized people in society, but yet they're getting to push all these boundaries and taking away other people's rights. It's crazy. All these dominatrixes that do sissification services, they'll be going out of business soon, yeah, because these men can just badly apply their own ugly nylon wigs and makeup at home and walk around the streets with their cock and balls showing in a miniskirt, and yeah, and they don't have to pay services to do that, and when they can do it themselves, then you can get sissification too. You can feel proud of what you're doing, or you can feel embarrassed about you doing, but you still have to do it. And both depending on what your kink was, both those ways can give you a euphoria boner. And so either you're being humiliated yourself, or you're humiliating other people by doing it. But both of those things is some perverse power trip that yeah, that men can do these days, just walking around the streets and seeing fear in women's eyes. Yeah, that's a huge rush for these people, these bad men. When I first started posting in 22, I did find people, yeah, some people would come. onto my private messages and say, it's really great what you're talking about. I completely agree with you. They'd send me posts about the subject and things like that. And it was nice-ish to start with. It was, thank you that you're acknowledging me. Thank you that you've not fell out with me. That is good to start with. But years have gone by and these same people are still sending me posts and things. And I feel like going, why don't you post it now? Why don't, you're sending me the bullets and I have to fire them. I have to lose my job. I have to lose my friends. I have to lose my public standing. And you can still feel safe, but feel a good person because, you're sending me these posts and things like, no, no, you post it publicly now. If all these people started speaking in public once in a while, I'm not saying to be look as obsessed as I am, but if you started posting it once, just do it once, this would never have happened. Uh, and I say that against myself as well. I mean, I posted in 22 to start with, but I'd been aware of all this for years before that. And I was a coward before that. So I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to lose my friends and my social status. I didn't want to lose possible job opportunities. Yeah, I was a coward as well, with good reason. I mean, yes, it's quite right to be a coward, but you've got to stand up eventually. I say, yeah, I want to keep my job, but right, fine. So what if I lose my job? It would be a big deal, but is me being unemployed any worse than some poor bitch stuck in a bloody prison cell with a rapist? Who's got the worst life? Me being unemployed, feeling sorry for myself, or some poor woman stuck in a prison cell with rapists, or not even rapists, male fetishists, threatening to rape them? Who's got the worst life? No, I'll lose my job. Fine, I'll lose my job, and I'll lose my friends. What's worse is it worse losing your friends, or is it worse these poor little children that are getting their tits cut off them when they're 16 or their cock and balls cut off when they're 16 because they've been transed by some horrendous evil adults? Fine, I'll lose friends then. Fine. Anything that the worst thing that can happen to me is not the worst thing that's happening to all those people out there that's really, really affected by it. So, no, I feel brave now. Uh, my life is not that bad. The worst that can happen to me is not as bad as what is happening to these people. So that gave me bravery to come out and talk. I haven't got trans people in my family or in my close relations at all. No, no, I haven't. And all my family agree with me, so I'm very lucky that way. Thank goodness. Yeah. Uh, Even if I had, I think I would still come out and talk about it. It would be much more devastating though. As I said, even my close friends, I've kept all them, thank God. So, um, but I can see that would be absolutely devastating. I know some people with trans children, and they think it's an absolute piece of nonsense, but they've got to keep quiet about it, and that must be horrendous for them. It must be absolutely horrendous, but thankfully, I don't have a situation like that. We all know what biology is, don't we? We all know what biology is. That's what. Why are we trying to pretend we don't know what biology is? And people are saying, "Are you a geneticist? Are you a doctor?" It's like, no. And there's actually loads of geneticists and doctors that try and pretend they don't know what the difference between a man and a woman. So there's like, no, I don't actually care. But the most idiotic person in the world knows the difference between a man and a woman. And also, I'm a zoologist as well, but you don't need to be a zoologist to know this. Animals can tell the difference between human men and human women. Dogs, there's dogs that are terrified of men and they're fine with women. When you go to South Africa, I know a friend that worked with baboons in South Africa. The baboons would steal from the women and they wouldn't steal from the men. And they know that baboons know the difference between races as well. They steal from, first of all, they'll steal from the white women, then they'll steal from the black women, then they'll steal from the white men, and then they'll steal from when they're really emboldened, they'll steal from the black men. So baboons know the difference between men and women. And then also I was reading about animal experiments. and the psychological experiments on mice and rats, and there's this thing they need to do these all over again. I don't want anyone to do psychological experiments on animals, it's terrible. But the difference is like the mice and rats were much more comfortable with the women scientists than the men. So it's like a mouse knows the difference between a man and a woman, but here am I being told that I can't tell the difference between a man and a woman unless I demand that they pull their trousers down at the doorway of a public toilet. Why are we pretending this? Why are you saying this to me? Stop it. I'm not stupid. And a lot of my posts, again, a lot of my posts all begin with trans activists are liars. This is all about lies. This whole activism is about lies. It's lies, lies, lies. You're all liars. Even if you're lying to be kind, and some of them might actually, when you really, really push them, they really they have to admit they are lying, but they don't say use those words. They just use the words like, "Well, so what? How does it affect you anyway?" It's like so they're kind of admitting that they're lying. But trans activists are liars, and I don't say trans people are liars. I don't say that because not all trans people are trans activists, but trans activists are all liars. I am not a liar, and you're not going to make me be a fool and a liar. You're not going to make me to pretend to be a fool. I'm not doing it for you, not for anyone. If I'm a fool naturally, I'll go along with that. If I'm fool and I'm stupid, fine, but you're not going to make me pretend to be a fool. No way. I spoke to a nurse. She's a mental health nurse, and she worked with anorexia patients. Now we were talking because it's an interesting subject. And I was like, oh wow, it's interesting. I said, oh, I bet most of your patients are all women, aren't they? She goes, oh, they all are. Oh, she said, except one, and he that one is a man. A little bit further on, she goes, oh, it's a trans man, and I was like, wow. And she just looked at me and she agreed with me with her eyes. She said, yeah, yeah, because I think she was scared to talk about it because obviously I guess all her fellow mental health nurses didn't even bring up the subject. And I said, so you've got to agree with this young woman that she's not overweight. She is incredibly underweight and very unhealthy, but you've got to agree with her that she is a man and not a woman. She goes, yes, yes, we've got to agree with that. And the look of relief on this nurse's face when she could seem to have someone that she could talk to about it. That's abhorrent. You got your anorexics in the hospitals, being trans, taking the hormones. God knows what else they're going to do to her. Probably, of course. I mean, anorexic people don't. I think they don't. A lot of them don't like having breasts, do they? So perfect. Get them chopped off. Become a man. Wow. I know another nurse as well, and she worked on a uh, it's a ward where they get lots of alcoholics and drug addicts, and so there can be kind of bad behavior on that ward. There can be, uh, but they have a lot of laughs as well. But there can be bad behavior on it. So they got down a patient as a male ward, and they got down a patient, and she had just come out of intensive care. So when patients have spent a long time in intensive care, they can have a lot, they can have mental health problems because the brain has not been in use all that time, kind of. You know, some parts of the brain has not been in use all that time. So when they come out of the coma, the brain is just going haywire. The brain's got to remember all these, make up for all this lost time and make up memories for all this lost time. And this woman, I don't know if she was trans before she went to intensive care or trans just as she came out. However, now she was trans. She was a trans man, and they sent her to this male alcoholics and drug addicts ward. She was sitting there, and a lot of patients are like this. They won't keep their clothes on. They keep throwing the covers off them. So she's lying there naked on the bed with all these men walking around, and bless the men weren't being hot as anyone, any man would, any woman would. If someone's lying there naked, writhing on a bed, you look at them. You can't not look at that, can you? So they're walking past, going like, "Oh my God!" And she was like the nurse said, and she was, she was the most womanly woman I've ever seen. She had huge breasts, huge pubic mound, lots of pubic hair. I'm not being horrible by using these words, but when we're talking about that is a crude thing. And she's a very womanly looking woman. And all these men were going, just walking by, going like, oh, try not to look, but looking. And you think, how the nurse, how is that looking after a patient when you allow a woman who's got huge mental health problems to go and expose herself in front of men? How's that looking after patients? I know if the nurses had complained about it, they would have just got told, probably by the patient, probably by the patient's family, how dare you? You're a horrible bigot. So even the nurses can't look after their own patient's mental health. They had to go along with it. I don't know how long that patient was there for, but it's a horrendous story. To date, a man. He was a cross-dresser. He wasn't a cross-dresser when he was dating me, but when he was a teenager, him and his friend, they were on the goth scene and the fetish scene, and they used to go out dressed as women. And they didn't wear fake breasts and stuff, but they used to put on makeup. They had long hair, and there's all that very extreme goth look. And the girls loved it because girls just love that extreme look. I think they just loved the fact that if you're willing to be brave enough to go out dressed as a woman on a very manly scene, then it's like you've got guts. So I think the women just appreciated that. So yeah, and they never said they were women. They just were cross dressers. But it was to get girls. It wasn't a kink, or it was a kink for them. It was just get girls. It was just, yeah, they knew that. So I know another girl that I used to know very well. She's a lovely young woman, very, very slight, again, very, very slightly built woman, very small, tiny little petite hands and all that. Now she's saying she's a man. It's like, where do you think that you can be a man? Come across as, no one's going to believe that. She's had years and years of mental health problems, suicidal. So of course her social workers or psychiatrists have now convinced her, oh, you're actually a man. Now she's had her breasts chopped off and she's on hormones. And of course she's much more suicidal than ever. I don't know what her mental state is now. I've not heard of her recently, but it's incredibly sad. Is it's such an understatement. It's criminal. It's absolutely criminal what we're doing to these people. Terrible. I think a lot of people like nurses that they don't really know about it. It's not really mentioned a lot in the news and things like that, is it? I think you've just got to be on social media and things to really find out about it. I mean, I learned everything about it on Twitter and things. It's just coming out in the news now, but a lot of them probably haven't heard about the I've not been paying much attention to the gender laws coming out and things. Well, again, it's the women thing, isn't it? Nurses are very feminine. They take pride in I'm very caring. It's like, but your care can't just stop at one's wall. It can't stop at sex, can't it? You got to care for everybody. Do you not care for the women? No, you just care for the cross-dressing men. It's just virtue signaling, isn't it? That's not real care. That's not real compassion. And I say as well, and I know it's kind of vulgar as well, but it's like if you, as a woman, you don't mind a man exposing his genitals to you, and if you, as a woman, also want to share a changer and you want to get naked in front of him, I say, there's places you can go to do that in private. And I think there's car parks at night where you can do things like that. If that's what you want to do and you don't mind doing that, you go and do that. But I don't want to do that. Most of us don't want to do that. Please let us have our dignity. Thank you. Oh, I was very nervous to start with, yeah. I was very nervous to share my gender critical beliefs. But nervous, scared, but quite rightly scared though. Yeah, but once I did it, I just felt very proud of myself. I wouldn't say proud as was I stopped being ashamed of myself, actually, I would say. I stopped being ashamed of myself, allowing everyone else to take the rap for these just to talk about these terrible things that's going on. So it's like, no, I no, it's good. I feel good now, and it has affected my life somewhat, but I wouldn't change what I've done. It's fine. I can stand proud, and there was a lot of people that were taking the rap, famous people and not famous people. Poor old Graham Linehan's lost his career over it, and lots of people lost stuff. So it's like, yeah, okay, I need to join you guys. You've been very brave, so I need to be brave now. So I feel good about it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't, I mean, I say I feel proud about being out and out gender critical, but I still choose my moments when to talk about it. But if someone brought up the subject, I wouldn't be quiet or go along with it. I would air my views on the subject. I've not really had conversations with people. I've had people shouting at me and calling me horrible names in real life, but it's never been a proper discussion. Uh, yeah, I've not. I would love to have a proper debate with someone, but no one either they blank you, won't talk to you, or they just shout at you and call you horrible names. There's just no discussion going on from the other side. And to be fair, I'm not going to meet midway with this. There's nothing that they can say that would make me think that extreme trans activism is fine. I mean, I was on their side to start with. Lots of gender critical people started from I don't mind, no, trans, you can cross dress if you want, as long as you're a nice person and you don't do any bad thing. We're all open-minded, and then now we're going. So I was on their, I can see their point of view somewhat, but you're not going to make me change my mind that extreme trans activism is a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. You can't tell me that there's no difference between men and women, therefore men should be in women's sports. You're never going to convince me of that. You're never going to convince me that trans women are nice enough that they should be in women's prisons. And I would just like to put out there, when I say the word trans women, I'm saying it with tongue in cheek. I do not call them trans women in my day-to-day life. They're trans-identified men. That's the politest way I can put it. I think when I was younger, I just got into the fetish scene. I suppose I was a late bloomer, 28. I just loved the fashions. And I got a job in one of the fetish shops. It was a nice, stylish fetish shop. They sold nice clothes, and I got a job in there. And then from there, I started going to the clubs. It really was more of a fashion thing, and then from there you make friends that are into the same scene and the music and the clothes, and then you have a little maybe do a little doming at the clubs or something just for fun. I was always just doing it for fun. And I had my own company that made latex fashions as well, so I was in it for a long time. And you meet the models and things, so yeah, that's why. It's more of a style thing for me. The rubber clothes and the PVC clothes and the high heels and things. I liked all that. Yeah, personal services, exactly. That's a great example. Yeah, all those, man, and then those men enjoyed the secretiveness of it. That's what made it exciting. Against like, how is a lot of these kinkies is like, well, if you're, that's what worries me as well. Is like, it's you need to up the antes of the shame makes it exciting. So if society is now telling you that cross-dressing is not shameful anymore, you've got to up to the next level of shame, haven't you? So what's that going to be? Well, flashing maybe. I don't know. But they've got to keep changing that. They've got to be shamed and embarrassed or shocking. So they've got to find a new kink. So we're making these perverts find an even more deeper level of perversion by allowing them to roam around the society. When I worked in the shop in Soho, our boss was a Malaysian gay guy who was cross-dressing at the weekend. He was incredibly womanly acting, and all his friends. So there's all these Malaysian, we called them the Malaysian trannies, and they're all very, very feminine, nice, and they all had a good sense of humor about themselves, what they were doing. They made jokes about themselves. They were good. They actually looked quite, when they had all their makeup on, they looked quite good as well. Not, you know, you didn't look like a woman, but they looked very attractive. One of their friends was Camille, and so they used to call him Camilla Parker Balls. They used to call him. But this Camille is Dr. Kamilla Kamaruddin. So he's the doctor that Maya Forstater was complaining about. Have you heard of it? And so when I knew him, he was by far the least convincing. He always looked like a man. He's got a head the size of a globe. He looked like a man. And he was a GP at the time. And I know, so we said to him, oh, what would you do if you had to examine a woman, because he was so gay, so gay. But what would you if you had to examine a woman? He'd go, "Oh no, I would do that. It would be disgusting." He wasn't at work. I know it's about just gay bravado in the middle of the shop. It's just like you're a GP. That's what you're saying. You wouldn't examine a woman because it would be disgusting. You really, surely even when you're out, your professional ethics shouldn't have allowed you to say that. No, it was a long time ago. Maybe he's changed now, but but he's now saying that he is a woman and that he does do intimate exams on women when it should just be a woman to woman thing. But he does intimate exams on women because he is a woman and he's allowed to do that. And so my Forstater called him out on it and said, "You're not a woman. You should not be doing that." So she's getting into trouble for it. The police turned up at her door and things. And now, he's got a great job. He works with gender health services and all that. Just I knew you when you were Camilla Parker Bowles, and you were saying women are disgusting, and you wouldn't examine them. Again, it's infuriating. It's like women are disgust. This is the homosexual transgenders. Women are disgusting. Women are so disgusting, but you actually want to be one, and you'd probably, I don't know if he has, but you'd very likely to have surgery to look like them and get all to emulate their body parts. But no, no, women are disgusting. Yeah. Typical woman hating transsexual. It has impacted my views on women's rights. Yeah, I just, the the feminist rights organizations that are pushing for this trans extreme rights, I I just cannot understand it at all. I'm absolutely baffled by how they can rationalize this. Just not, I cannot get it at all. They've never given a good reason. They just say it's just the only reason they give is trans women are women. That's all they can say. I just don't get it. So I abhor them. I really hate them. And I know a lot of so-called feminist friends, and they go along with it as well. I just don't get it. So now if you hear someone's a feminist, you have to say, well, what kind of feminist? What kind of feminist are you? So that there's a lot of different kinds of feminists. And as we said, some little salt of the earth man out there who couldn't care less about what we thought couldn't care less about women's rights. They're going, no, it's a disgrace. Women should have their own toilets and all that, So they're more feminist than the feminist organisations. It's kind of it gets to the case now. Uh, one would be embarrassed to call themselves a feminist. You can't just use that word now. You would have to always explain what kind of feminist you are. I would have to do that now, yeah. Yeah, I think women's rights campaigner makes more sense, yeah. But again, the trans people will hijack that as well. They'll hijack everything. They'll attack women's rights because trans women are women, so trans women's rights are women's rights. Well, they have used that, haven't they? So at least we know what it means just for now. I mean, again, trans activism all they've got is language. They've not got reality. All they've got is the obfuscation of words. This changing the meaning of words. That's all they've got. They have nothing else.
You've been listening to Unsilenced Project.